Somewhere in Tehran tonight, the regime is doing two things at the same time, counting bodies and scheduling executions. And now here's the number that's blowing up everywhere. At the exact moment Iran is trying to shut the internet down, some unconfirmed reports are claiming 12,000 dead. Let me be crystal clear from the start. We can't independently verify that number right now because communications are being cut and the regime is choking off access. But that's the point. When the internet goes dark, the worst numbers travel the fastest. And one more thing has changed the tone of this story in the last few hours. A young detainee, arrested by the regime, is reportedly facing an execution scheduled for today. That's not crowd control. That's the kind of move meant to scare an entire country into silence. And if you're thinking, we've seen protests in Iran before, let me stop you right there. This isn't 2019. This isn't 2022. Something broke this time. Now, I'm going to show you what changed in the last 24 hours, what can be tracked, and what's spreading as unconfirmed reporting, because the next few hours could be decisive. Let's separate what can be supported from what's exploding as rumor. In the last 24 hours, human rights monitors tracking the unrest have pushed the death toll into the thousands, and reports of mass detentions have surged too, tens of thousands by some counts. That's the trackable part of the story. More dead, more detained, more repression, more disappearances. And the geography tells you something critical. This isn't just Tehran anymore. It's all 31 provinces, 186 cities, nearly 600 documented protest sites. Students, workers, retirees, women, ethnic minorities, Kurds, Lurs, Baluch, all in the streets at the same time. This isn't an isolated flare-up. This is a country saying, enough. And now comes the part that's turning into gasoline. The 12,000 dead figure is being thrown around as unconfirmed reporting. And it spreads precisely because Iran is trying to make the truth impossible to verify. Because when a regime shuts down the internet, the goal isn't just to stop coordination, it's to erase evidence. And when evidence disappears, panic fills the space. And panic does two things at once. It pushes the public into rage, and it pushes the elite toward escape. That's how systems start to crack. Now here's the most dangerous part of this update. There's a case involving a young man arrested by the regime, convicted, with an execution described as imminent. Today, and that's not a detail, that's a signal. Because when a regime chooses to execute someone in the middle of nationwide protests and rising death counts, it's not just punishing one person, it's sending a message to millions. Get off the streets or you're next. That's state terror on a timetable. And here's what you need to understand about how Iran's legal system is being used right now. Anyone in the streets can be charged with mohareba, waging war against God. Under Iranian law, that can mean an automatic death sentence. No real appeal, no delay, execution. They're not even pretending anymore. This isn't crowd control. This is a regime fighting for its own survival. And here's the truth regimes hate admitting. Executions in the middle of unrest rarely end unrest. Executions create martyrs. They create funerals. They create the next wave. And if this happens today, you could see something very specific in the next few hours. The protests change volume. Because it's no longer demonstrations. It becomes political vengeance. In the last 24 hours, a second thing has become clearer. The regime is moving away from the language of public order and into the language of survival. When leaders in the judiciary talk about fast-track proceedings, maximum punishments, and executions, that's the system saying, we're not negotiating, we're crushing this. And that's the classic pattern of regimes under extreme stress. Mass arrests, rapid trials, total censorship, internet blackouts, and one goal: break the population before the population breaks the system. And let me show you how desperate they've gotten. The regime announced a monthly cash handout, $7 per person. Think about that, $7, in a country where basic food can cost more than that, where the currency has cratered from about 32,000 rials per dollar to roughly 1.5 million in just 5 years. That's not relief, that's an insult. And when a regime offers crumbs while the streets are on fire, it usually means the leadership is cornered. But here's the bigger problem. Cutting the internet doesn't cut the emotion. Deleting the video doesn't delete the grief. And you can't delete grief. When a regime starts killing and hiding, it enters a cycle that's hard to stop. More deaths, more rage, more repression, more deaths. It's a spiral, and they're already deep in it. Now here's what raised the stakes in the last few hours. Trump just stepped into the story. He sent a direct message into the air. If the regime starts executing protesters, the U.S. response could escalate. And that matters for one simple reason. Iran understands one thing better than any speech: signals. When a former president and a central figure in American power talks about very strong action and hints that help is on the way, the regime reads that as a warning. And look at the timing. The New York Times just reported that Trump has been briefed on military options. Not just nuclear sites, government buildings in Tehran, cyber operations, critical infrastructure, and the Wall Street Journal published details. Strike packages, target lists, timing windows. Was that leak intentional? Almost certainly. Because the message isn't subtle. We're ready. And then the domino effect kicks in. The street gets braver because people feel the world is watching. The regime gets more paranoid because it sees outside interference and accelerates the crackdown. And the risk of a fatal mistake goes up because any spark becomes a casus belli. This is the point where an internal crisis becomes an international one. Because if the regime carries out an execution to make an example, and Trump treats it like a red line, you create the most dangerous scenario possible: pressure from within and threat from outside at the same time. And when that happens, the regime doesn't always choose the most rational option. It chooses the most brutal one. In the next few hours, the question isn't just, can Iran hold? The question is, does Iran double down, or does it lose control? And here's the part that connects everything. There's a report, unconfirmed but circulating, that Khamenei has a contingency plan, an escape route to Moscow, a list of 20 names, family, senior officials, the inner circle. We can't verify whether it's real, actionable, or disinformation. But here's why it matters either way. Even the rumor changes behavior. Security commanders start asking, if the top is thinking about leaving, why should I take the bullet? Protesters start asking, if the top is thinking about leaving, maybe we're closer than we think. That's how regimes crack, not only from the streets, but from doubt spreading inside the machine. And here's what makes this different from the Shah in 1979. The Shah fled to Egypt, then Morocco, then Panama, then Mexico. He spent his final years being turned away, country after country. Khamenei has somewhere to go. Russia would take him. Putin and Khamenei have drawn closer over the last 3 years. Drones for Ukraine, sanctions evasion, shared enemies. That's not speculation. That's strategic alignment. The question is whether he waits too long. So here's the update with no makeup. 12,000 dead is circulating as unconfirmed reporting. And the internet blackout makes it even harder to verify. Trackable counts from monitors point to deaths in the thousands, with mass detentions surging. Trump has entered the conversation with direct warnings. Military options are on the table. Strike packages have been leaked. And the most dangerous trigger of all is this: an execution scheduled for today. If it happens, the regime may think it won the day, but it may be manufacturing the event that turns this into something it can't contain. The next few hours could decide the tone of the next few weeks. And here's what I'm going to do. The moment there's solid confirmation, or any change in that execution case, I'll post another update. Because when a regime shuts down the internet, it's not because things are fine. It's because it's slipping out of control.